Ladies and gentlemen, we are officially at the midpoint of the 2023 NFL season, so that means it's time to grade how every team has done thus far. Super Bowl contenders, Caleb Williams hopefuls, and everything in between. Now, before we get into it, this video is brought to you by NFL Sunday Ticket on YouTube and YouTube TV. So even though I'm about to give my thoughts on how every team season has gone thus far, you can still see how every team season ultimately plays out with this new deal. With NFL Sunday Ticket now on YouTube and YouTube TV, you can watch your favorite teams out-of-market Sunday afternoon games every week, no 2-year contract required. And now that we're at the midpoint of the season, you can get it for 50% off. You can also bundle and save on NFL Sunday Ticket with YouTube TV and get 100+ live TV channels. So get Sunday Ticket now by clicking the link in the description. All right, let's get into it. We'll go division by division, starting with the AFC East. The Miami Dolphins get an A-. The Miami Dolphins are the zoomies capital of the NFL. They've got Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Raheem Mostert, and Devon Achane leading them to first place in the AFC East. Their offense makes me dizzy if I stare at it too long. The only concern with them so far is that their 2 losses have come to last year's Super Bowl teams, the Chiefs and the Eagles, which doesn't sound bad at first because, yeah, you're losing to really good teams. But it's making people wonder, are they contenders or are they just pretenders? With zoomies. I think they'll be just fine. They were very much in both of those games, and they're as strong as Super Bowl contenders as we've got in the AFC. The New York Jets season has not gone how they expected it to go. If you had it on your bingo card that Aaron Rodgers would tear his Achilles on his first ever drive as a New York Jet, 1, what's wrong with you? But 2, did you expect them to still be in the mix halfway through the season? Their record is not that bad. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if they had this record with Aaron Rodgers, considering he would have had to acclimate to a new team for the first time in 18 years. But instead, they have this record with Zach Wilson leading the way and the defense doing a lot of heavy lifting. They have performed well above expectations after Aaron Rodgers went down, so I have to give them at least an A- as well. The Bills don't look great. Stop me if you've heard this one before. Their defense has been ravaged by injuries. Matt Milano, Tre'Davious White, and Daquan Jones are all on IR, and combine that with Josh Allen turning the ball over a lot once again, and that's why you find the Bills at 5-4. I feel like a mean professor for having to give out this grade for something that isn't fully their fault, but that's what I gotta do. Relative to expectations, the Buffalo Bills get a C. The New England Patriots. Dear Lord. For anyone that thought getting rid of Matt Patricia was the magic pill to make this team competitive again, me, you were wrong. This is the worst New England Patriots team Bill Belichick has ever fielded, and it doesn't seem like things are going to get better anytime soon. This season has been an unmitigated disaster for the Patriots, with essentially no bright spots except the guys on IR like Matt Judon and Christian Gonzalez. And so even though this is my own team, I have no choice but to give them a big fat F. The Baltimore Ravens. Look who might be putting it together. Lamar Jackson is playing with the poise of an MVP again, even if his numbers don't show it because their run game has also been good. An incredible accomplishment in itself considering J.K. Dobbins tore his Achilles week 1, but the Ravens have used their new offensive identity and one of the best defenses in the league to take first place in the AFC North. Gotta give them an A. The Pittsburgh Steelers. Yikes. Look, their record isn't bad, but it's essentially the equivalent of not studying for a test and doing well on it anyway. A 5-3 record with a minus 30-point differential sounds a lot like a baby version of last year's Vikings. Like, yeah, you're winning games, but you probably don't deserve it, and it's not going to sustain. Their run game has been cheeks. Matt Canada has been cheeks. Kenny Pickett hasn't looked that good. And even the defense, their usual calling card, hasn't been good, allowing the 3rd most yards per game in the NFL. Look, the record is the record, so I got to give them some credit for that, I guess, but I'm not giving them anything more than the C+. The Cincinnati Bengals, on the other hand, trending the exact opposite direction of the Steelers, despite having the same record. Joe Burrow's calf is healthy, and the Bengals look like the Bengals again, which is a problem for the AFC. Look, the Bengals still played really bad early on, and I can't fully ignore that, so I'm going to give them a B for their efforts thus far, with the understanding that their end-of-season grade will probably be a lot higher. The Cleveland Browns have been a defensive force this year, and it's a good thing, because Deshaun Watson's been pretty bad. I don't know where that MVP form he had with the Texans went, but it doesn't look like it's coming back anytime soon. And it's been bad to the point where there hasn't been much drop-off when they've had to replace Deshaun with PJ Walker due to injury at times this season. But nonetheless, sitting at 5-3 with subpar quarterback play and Nick Chubb being done for the year is nothing to scoff at. Jim Schwartz and this defense have done a masterful job, so I have no choice but to give the 5-3 Cleveland Browns a B+. The Jacksonville Jaguars, you know, they just always leave me wanting more. I wanted Trevor Lawrence to take this MVP step, and he hasn't done that. I wanted Calvin Ridley to come back from his gambling suspension and be that guy. He has not been that guy, and yet they still sit at 6-2 atop the AFC South, so what more can you really ask for? With that said, though, the performances haven't been super convincing, and it doesn't seem like they should have the same record as a team like the Dolphins, so I'm gonna go with a B+. The Houston Texans have been way more competitive than anyone expected, and that's because CJ Stroud decided that as a rookie, he wanted to be God. Coming off a 470-yard, 5-touchdown performance, this guy is looking like a revelation for Houston. And it's not just him. The team looks motivated by new head coach DeMeco Ryans. They have a ton of young talent that they're building around. Relative to Houston's expectations coming into the year, they absolutely get an A. The Colts are a weird one because they're sitting here at 4-5. They really only have one impressive win, that being over the Ravens early in the season. And yet they've stayed really competitive all season long. An impressive feat considering they lost Anthony Richardson, which I'm sure was demoralizing. Looking big picture here, they made the right move extending Jonathan Taylor, and the Gardner Minshew-led Colts are giving people problems. I didn't expect the Colts to win more than 3 games, maybe all year, and so even though they're mostly only beating bad teams, I'm gonna give them an A-. The Tennessee Titans are in a pretty sad state of affairs. Maybe Will Levis will be a bright spot. He threw 4 touchdowns in his first ever game, but then followed that up with a bit of a dud. But this is a team that came into the season not committing to a rebuild, even though they clearly needed one, and that's just left them in no man's land. They brought in DeAndre Hopkins, which tells me they wanted to be competitive this year, which is just completely delusional, and now they're 3-5, so they're not gonna get a very good grade. I'm giving the Titans a C-. The Kansas City Chiefs, what else is new? They're 7-2, atop the AFC West, and they look like they're headed for the 1 seed in the AFC once again, if not at least the 2 seed. The only concern with them is that their receivers have been kind of mid, but their defense is making up for it. This is probably the best defense the Chiefs have had in the Patrick Mahomes era. So even though they haven't looked like this unbeatable powerhouse with absolutely no weaknesses, I can't give them anything less than an A. The Las Vegas Raiders, D+. Their record may say otherwise, but this has been one of the most embarrassing teams in the NFL this year. They entered this season on a misguided hope that Josh McDaniels could actually lead a team to success, which ultimately landed them in purgatory again. Jimmy G's bad, Aiden O'Connell's raw, Devontae Adams isn't getting used, Josh Jacobs has been inefficient, and the Raiders are just down bad in general. They only get a D+ because they actually fired the guys who were the problem, so at least they're taking a step in the right direction, but overall, not a pretty sight. The Los Angeles Chargers, doing Charger things once again, having a very talented roster and not having the record to go with it. It's honestly impressive how they manage to underachieve every year. Look, they're not bad, but as a longtime Charger hopeful, they are not where I wanted them to be. I'm gonna give them a B-. The Denver Broncos, D+. It's kind of funny how the Broncos managed to just completely flip the script from last year, where their defense was really, really good and their offense couldn't do anything, and now their defense can't do anything except allow 70 points to the Dolphins, but their offense actually hasn't been bad, and Russell Wilson has statistically been one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL. There was a lot of talk that the Broncos could completely blow things up at the trade deadline, and now I think that's just slated to happen when the offseason hits. But no matter how you look at it, year 1 with Sean Payton has been a pretty big failure, other than the offense kind of turning around, so D+. Moving over to the NFC, the Philadelphia Eagles look like probably the best team in the NFL. Their roster had a lot of turnover on the defensive side of the ball, and that is manifesting itself with them having a pretty bad pass defense, but the run defense has been elite, the offense has been elite, and the tush push is making people want to rip their hair out. As long as this team can stay healthy, they're probably my Super Bowl pick, and that's why I'm going to give them an A. And if you haven't caught on yet, nobody's getting an A+, because every team has some sort of weakness. Just wouldn't make sense. Like the Dallas Cowboys, whose weakness is deciding when they want to show up. They lost 3 games in the first half, and really only one of them was acceptable. Their loss to the Eagles in Philly. Losing to San Francisco is understandable, but not when it's 42-10. And losing to the Cardinals, I got nothing for it. The Cowboys are constantly going back and forth from elite to just good, so I'm not going to give them an A. I'm going to settle on a B+ for Dallas in the first half. The Washington offense has actually looked pretty good with Eric Bieniemy in the fold. Sam Howell is one of the league leaders in passing yards, but their defense has been a disaster, and it's only going to get worse now that they traded away Montez Sweat and Chase Young. Props to Washington for scraping together a somewhat respectable 4-5 record so far, but they're still not getting anything better than a C. The New York Giants, F. Fat F. And before you tell me this is unfair because Daniel Jones has been hurt, I really feel like they'd be just as bad if Daniel Jones was healthy. Him getting hurt might actually be a blessing in disguise for the rest of the year. It's nothing personal with Danny Dimes. I criticized the contract when it happened, but giving $40 million a year to a guy who can't really throw the ball is just a bad idea. And then you factor in that their offensive line might be the worst in the NFL, and there is just nothing to hang your hat on with this team. From playoff team to one of the worst teams in the NFL, the Giants absolutely deserve this F. Welcome to the club, guys. The Detroit Lions have been everything we've hoped for. A lot of people were worried the Lions would be all hype and they wouldn't live up to it. Well, they're living up to it. Started the season off with an opening night win over the Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs, and they've only kept that momentum going since. Dan Campbell's got his boys fighting, so they absolutely get an A for their performance in the first half. I think the Minnesota Vikings just found the lucky rabbit's foot they had all of last year, because after the first 5 weeks they were 1-4, it seemed like regression was in full force because they weren't that good last year, but they won a bunch of games anyway. But now, since being 1-4 and with Justin Jefferson on IR, the Vikings have won 4 straight, including Josh Dobbs coming in and leading them to a win, even though he didn't know the playbook or his teammates' last names. Credit to the Vikings for holding things together. I don't think they keep it up the rest of the season, but these are mid-season grades, so I'll give them a B+. The Green Bay Packers get a D. Really just nothing to be excited about right now if you're a Packers fan. Jordan Love hasn't looked very good, and it's starting to seem like there was a reason why they kept him on the bench for 3 years, other than Aaron Rodgers being really good. They traded Rasul Douglas to the Bills. Aaron Jones has been hobbled by an injury all year. Just ugly football up there in Green Bay, so D. The Chicago Bears, D. If we evaluate the Justin Fields version of this team, he's had games where he's looked absolutely electric, and he's had games where it looks like he might be on a different team next year. But either way, the Bears are 2-7, which I'm sure is not what they envisioned when they traded away last year's #1 overall pick. And in the midst of this 2-7 season, they traded for Montez Sweat and extended him for $100 million over 4 years. Acquiring good players is never a bad thing, but is he really a $25 million a year player, and should you really be making that kind of commitment now? Just kind of a weird move topping off a disappointing season, so they definitely get a D. I really don't want to talk about this division, but I guess I have to. It's the NFC South. Just a gross mess of teams, starting with the New Orleans Saints, who I will give a B. Look, they're sitting on top of the division at 5-4. Their defense has been really good, but Derek Carr has not been what they'd hoped for. I'm sure 10 passing touchdowns through 9 games was not what they had in mind when they signed him to a 4-year, $150 million contract. But ultimately, the offense has been doing enough, largely led by Alvin Kamara dump-offs, to go with that defense and lead them to first place in the NFC South. They haven't been terrible, just nothing exciting, so they get a B and probably a first-round playoff exit. The Atlanta Falcons, F. Just F. I don't care, F. They're 4-5, firmly in the trenches of this disgusting division, and they could be a lot better if Arthur Smith just knew how to coach. I'm done tiptoeing around it. I don't care if I come off as one of those guys that thinks they know more than an NFL coach, but I at least know that using your good players is probably a good formula to win games. And yet here the Falcons are at 4-5, wondering how this could have possibly happened when 80% of their playbook is jet sweeps to Jonnu Smith and Tyler Algier runs up the middle. I have no pity for the Falcons anymore, and I don't care that their record isn't completely horrible. They still get an F. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, worse record, better grade. I'm gonna give them a C- because I don't think Baker Mayfield is the answer for this team, but he's at least keeping them interesting. I mean, I'll watch Mike Evans catch deep balls from this guy all day long. I do not care. This is definitely still a transitional season for the Bucs. I'm sure a rebuild is coming sooner than later, but at least they're fairly competitive and they're keeping the on-field product entertaining. And honestly, with this division, a playoff appearance still isn't out of the question. The Carolina Panthers. D. Look, this is obviously a rebuilding team. They have a rookie quarterback that they took first overall, but I just feel like things should look a little better right now than they do. Like, the Texans are at 4-4, so why are the Panthers 1-7? There's plenty of time for Bryce Young to turn things around. There's plenty of time for this entire team to turn things around, but it's hard to grade this season for anything other than what it is. A really, really, really rough building block. Like, I'm not gonna give them a better grade just because I think better days are ahead. The San Francisco 49ers. Look, I don't know what's going on here, but I guess I'm giving them a B+. If you had told me 3 weeks ago that I would be making this video and I'd give the Niners anything less than an A or even an A+, I would have called you insane. But here we are, and they've dropped 3 straight games against the Browns, the Vikings, and the Bengals. 3 straight weeks where they just have not looked like the powerhouse that we thought could steamroll their way to the Super Bowl and beat a team like the Cowboys 42-10. I still think they're going to be just fine, and we're probably headed towards a Philly-San Francisco rematch, hopefully one at full health in the NFC Championship game this year, but still some weird developments for this team the last couple weeks. The Seattle Seahawks, B-. Look, they've got some good wins. They beat the Lions, they beat the Browns, and then they got their lights knocked out by the Baltimore Ravens. This team could still push for a wild card spot, but they have not looked as good as I hoped they would. The Geno Magic seems like it might be gone. He's on pace for roughly 18 touchdowns and 14 interceptions after going for 30 and 11 last year, and their defense has been firmly middle of the pack, so just a down year for the team as a whole. The Los Angeles Rams, C. The Rams started the year competitive with a win over the Seahawks and close losses to the 49ers and Bengals, so after thinking this would be a lost season for the Rams, we were like, oh, maybe they're gonna surprise us. Nah. They've fallen down to 3-6 and are now solidly in the they are who we thought they were territory. And the Arizona Cardinals, D. They're sitting with the same record as the Carolina Panthers, but they've been a lot more competitive over the course of the first half, including, again, a win over the Cowboys. So even though their record is terrible, they've at least been a little feisty and fun to watch, and that earns them a D+ in my eyes. Shout out Josh Dobbs once again. So there you have it, my mid-season grades for all 32 NFL teams. Let me know in the comments which grades you agree with, disagree with, and let me know who you think is gonna pop off or disappoint in the second half. And remember, you can still watch your favorite teams out-of-market Sunday afternoon games every week for the rest of the season on YouTube and YouTube TV. NFL Sunday Ticket is now 50% off, and you can sign up using the link in the description. As always, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.